It wasn't there when I went up.
All right, guys, I think we will get started. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, fellow citizens, good evening and welcome to the Winthrop Teachers Association 2023 Candidate Forum for candidates running for positions on the school committee and town council. My name is Ray Leonardo, and I'm the president of the Winthrop Teachers Association. It is a privilege to represent the WTA as one of tonight's moderators as we gather to engage in a democratic tradition that lies at the very heart of our community's well-being. This forum is a testament to the strength of our democracy and the fundamental principle that every voice, regardless of its origin, deserves to be heard. In our ever-evolving world, local politics plays a crucial role in shaping the fabric of our community. Tonight, we have the unique opportunity to get to know the individuals who have stepped forward, willing to dedicate their time, energy, and expertise to serve the interests of our community. They are the potential stewards of our shared future, and it is our responsibility to scrutinize their ideas, visions, and plans to make an informed decision at the ballot box in November. I want to applaud each of the candidates who have taken the brave step to participate in this forum. It takes a special kind of dedication to step into the public arena, and your willingness to do so speaks to your commitment to our community. Tonight's forum is the embodiment of the ideals upon which our nation was founded, a place where citizens engage in a civil discourse to shape their community's future. So let us remember the importance of respectful dialogue and an open-mindedness as we embark on this journey together. I'd like to thank the candidates present tonight, as well as Director McClay and the Winthrop Public Library for setting up this space for us. And finally, a special thanks to Mark Dixon, our co-moderator for tonight, a social studies teacher and WTA building representative at the high school, as well as members of the WTA e-board for helping to organize and facilitate tonight's event, including our Vice President, Lauren Costigan, and our Public Relations Director, Brian Donnelly. Now, I'd like to take a moment to welcome Winthrop High School's Student Government Vice President and Senior Class Vice President, Reese Broden, as she leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Reese. And with that, I'd like to welcome up to the front Committee Member Lane Petrie and Mr. Zach Purinton, candidates for the Winthrop School Committee. So this first question is going to be to Committee Member Petrie. How can the school committee work to attract and retain high-quality teachers in our schools, including addressing issues like fair compensation and professional development?
Sure, that's a good question. I work in public schools right now, and I know how hard retention is. We struggle with it in the district that I work in. Finding committed professionals, most of us in the field are committed, but finding matches for people who care about the work and their needs are being met by the district that employs them can be a tough balance. There are limitations in our town, regarding budget, but I do think that there are creative ways that we can all work together to make sure that we are recruiting and retaining the strong and passionate people that we have in this district. I personally have sent a handful of candidates to the Winthrop Public Schools when I knew that their candidacy or their interest in the district that I work in was not going to work, and so I've been trying to find tap into my own networks and my own pool of interests in order to try to enhance the candidate pool that Winthrop has to choose from. I think that Massachusetts in general, a lot of our districts really should combine ideas and work together to try to find candidates from the level of colleges. I think that the graduates that we have now who are coming out of schools with student loans and they're entering into public schools with student loan debts, that's a real barrier. And I would love to see something like college programs from the state level where we have accessibility to these professional degrees. I apologize, I'm under the weather today. But access to professional degrees with lower student debt, and I think that that'll alleviate some of the pressure from the districts to offset some of the debt that our young professionals have coming into the field. It's a long-term goal. I am committed to it, and I'm happy to do what I can. Thank you.
Mr. Purinton, we'll ask you the same question. As an outsider seeking election to the board for the first time, how can the school committee, if you were to be elected, work to attract and retain high-quality teachers in our schools, including issues like addressing fair compensation and professional development?
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Again, I'm Zachary Purinton. I'm the new runner for the school committee. But when it comes to retaining, we all understand that there is a limited budget to work with. And so one of the thoughts that we would have to bring to the town council and the finance committee is how can we either move some money around to increase the ability for salary or adjust the benefit packages so that even if the salaries don't go up, the benefits are making up the difference, or at least trying to make up the difference. But along with that, making sure that we keep our schools up to date, clean, maintenance is done on time, and providing a safe and healthy work environment for the teachers.
We'll start with you on the next one. What programs and practices could the Winthrop Public Schools implement in order to prepare students for life after high school? Specifically, I don't know, job sharing, any kind of, program like that. And are there any barriers that you see existing right now in our system to making that happen?
Well, some things I've thought about for helping the students with their post-high school careers is working with the curriculum and the teachers to possibly build in things like interview techniques, other things like, making sure that they are good at researching their own interests and understanding what the workforce is currently seeking, but also adding in, working with programs like SHOP and economics and understanding, how to balance a checkbook and keep your finances and how to, not get yourself too far into debt so that when you do get out of high school and college, if they choose to, they don't feel so far behind the 8 ball. As for barriers, I'm not sure of any yet, but I welcome the challenge.
Good. And same question to you.
Sure. I think that the partnership that we have with CASA right now in the high schools and what they're doing with practicing resume building and interview skills, financial literacy and fluency, I think that those are really strong programs that we have. If we can find more opportunities for them to disseminate further into the school and even younger. My first job was when I was 14. I was in middle school. I was in 8th grade. I had my own spending money. I was very cool. And I think that increasing opportunities for younger kids to have those opportunities and interests and know that that's available to them, workers permits, things like those kind of workshops that we might be able to share that information with families could be helpful. We have great college career fairs at the high school, and I think that increasing that to students that might not be we have great college fairs. I think that increasing that to career fairs or job fairs for kids that aren't necessarily interested in being college bound would be wonderful. Partnering with some of our local businesses, I've started to try to work on a vocational training program, particularly with students in our post-grad special education program. They've got a great in-house program for vocational training, but it's limited to what you can do within those 4 walls and within the current partnerships that exist. And I think that having more outside of school opportunities or even career clubs or something for kids, whether they're special ed, general ed, to explore different things, types of mini internships. I have an idea of what that could look like, and I think that that could be done in partnership with the school that won't necessarily drain school resources.
Good. Well, that's the Thrive Act, which you might be aware of, discontinues 2 failing policies, using standardized MCAS scores as a high school graduation requirement, and it also stops using standardized MCAS scores as evidence for placing school districts under state control. we're curious about whether you support the Thrive Act, and would you advocate for its passage? And if so, what kind of techniques would you use to do that?
Sure. I'm assuming it's to me first?
Yes.
Cool. I got the pattern. Right now, Massachusetts is one of only 8 states that requires standardized testing or passing of standardized testing as a graduation requirement, which is really limiting. If 42 other states don't require it, why are we still requiring it? I do support the Thrive Act. I think that our student body population, their learning needs, the way that they're presenting, the way that they're engaging with their world looks a lot different now than it did when I was in 3rd grade when MCAS was introduced in this state. I'm not that old, so it wasn't that long ago. So I think that incorporating and increasing opportunities with resources to be allocated for whole child learning is really important, and I think it's actually necessary to teach our students to engage with their world differently. I think putting an emphasis on academic coursework rather than passing a test is really important in terms of the stamina that our students are going to develop and the kind of quality programming that we can put our finances and resources into without worrying about can our students then pass MCAS, because that really pigeonholes us. And then having a single unit measure of how a district rates in the state is also really limiting, and I don't think that MCAS as a single unit of measure is really beneficial to the district or to the students. I do think that keeping MCAS in place is it's a single measure. We should use a bunch of different measurements. As we all know who work in schools, you look at more than one type of learning, more than one type of measure and assessment. And I also like that the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship is available to students when they're proficient on the MCAS, and that should continue to be available for students in our state. But I do not think that it should be a barrier to students graduating.
Okay. Good. Mr. Puritan, same question. Do you support the Thrive Act, and what kinds of things would you be willing to do in order to try to secure its passage?
Sure. So I'm just going to piggyback off of what Lane said, because I think she stated most of my points quite eloquently. One other item I always found fault with MCAS, and she kind of dated herself. I was in 10th grade the year before MCAS really became a thing, and I took the pre-MCAS test.
The pilot, yeah.
As the pilot program to see how it was going to go. So I'll date myself a bit there. Growing up, my mother taught 6th grade, so another grade that took MCAS, and the amount of stress that the teachers and students go through to not learn the material that will be on the test, but actually learning how to take a standardized test just negates so much that the children are trying to do and that the teachers are trying to do. So if we can remove the pressure of making it something that bases your graduation status on, I think that's a great idea. I do like the idea of still keeping it in place to gather data. Data analysis plays into so much now, but as to how I would work to help make sure that it passes, that's reaching out to our local and state level government people and making sure that they support and vote for the passage too.
Good, thank you.
I'll start. Keep going with you, sir. Issues in education have dominated the news lately, and Winthrop is no exception. Educators, administrators, school committee members around the country have been swept up in conversations around curriculum standards, topics in history, the humanities, library books, and initiatives surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. The way they stand now, do you support the Winthrop Public Schools policies on these topics, or would you like to see a change? If so, what changes would you propose?
Excellent question. So one of the biggest issues I've seen since becoming a part of the town and my daughter going through the GFB and now at ATC is teacher retention. And I think that is one of the biggest setbacks to our school system, is having to bring in new teachers after losing ones that are exciting and driven and just feeling they need to move on for one reason or another. And this all goes back to one of the biggest roadblocks is our budget. And there's very limited budget. The town has a very limited tax resource. There's not a whole lot of commercial property and other ways to drive income. So we'd have to work with the finance committee, town council, the town manager to see how we can rearrange the budget, hopefully get more to the school system to help increase the ability to retain teachers. As for the DEI, I work for a very large company. It's something that we talk about weekly. To the actual Winthrop school system, I'm not so familiar with that, but you know, I would like to see more languages taught in the school system and starting at a younger age. And as well, when I was co-chair of the GFB Site Council, we started the initiative to have monthly books based on different ethnicities and cultural backgrounds based on what the population of Winthrop was. So,
Thank you. Committee member, I'll ask the same question. We'll spare the preface. Do you support the policies that you currently have enacted, or if you were reelected, would you like to see a change in one aspect of these?
Sure. So I don't think that there's such thing as competence in the area of cultural awareness and diversity, equity, and inclusion, but I think that constantly seeking feedback and growth is always something that we should be striving to do, and I think that Winthrop does a good job of that. I think that the district as a whole, and I'm going to say you guys, because you all did it before I joined the school committee, with your implementation of the NYU curriculum and the assessment tools that you use in the classrooms, I think that that's a really data-driven way to start. Like, how do our classrooms look? We do that in my district in our special education programs, and so I think I know seeing what the learning environment looks like for our students and their different learning needs, regardless of what those are, is a great place to start. And then looking at where that data sits, where can we improve, where can we do better, and asking those questions is something that, in my experience, Winthrop is good at. I support the work that's being done, and I encourage any growth going forward.
Councilor Petrie, what is your stance on school choice? Where do you come down on that?
Great question. I wish that I could wholeheartedly support school choice, because I always want kids to get what they need out of school, and if that's a better hockey team or more foreign languages and that they can find that somewhere else, then I think that that's wonderful. But budgetarily speaking, the state average per student expense is lower across the state than it is in what we spend in Winthrop. And I think that financially we can't support school choice because it puts us at a real deficit financially. I do think that if we can find the money in the budget to build the programs like increased foreign language and a band program and things that are more enticing, maybe a career program for students that are postgraduate learners, I think that our district will then become admirable and be one that students want to come to for school choice, and that's where you make the money. That's where you can get the $17,500 per student. If it's only costing us $16,000 per student, then we're on the plus, and I think that that would be a great thing for us to aim for.
Okay. Good. And Mr. Purinton, same question. Where do you come down on school choice?
So I do support school choice. I actually benefited from school choice when I was a child. From 4th grade into 5th and 6th grade, my parents choiced me into a different school in the area. And I feel I certainly benefited from moving on from where I was going for elementary school to the second one. But as
Petrie.
Well, I was trying to get out either Mrs. or Councilwoman.
It's Miss. It's all right.
Miss Petrie pointed out that even though we do support choice, it's our jobs as school committee, teachers, administration to make Winthrop someplace that we want people to get choiced into, not choiced out of.
Mr. Purinton, I'll start with you. Start with you on our next and final question. Cell phones are a double-edged sword in our schools.
No.
Offering educational benefits and potential distractions. Middle and high school teachers regularly ask students to refrain from using a device so frequently that it takes ample time away from learning. As a school committee member, what policies or guidelines would you advocate to strike the right balance in regulating cell phone use within our educational institutions?
Interesting. So my child is only in 3rd grade, so she doesn't have a cell phone. I have yet to personally deal with this issue. But I'm not sure that I would love to say no cell phones out in the classroom. In fact, I don't know how the legal ramifications of this, if it's possible or not, but to have like a check-in place at the entrance to each classroom where the student takes their phone, puts it on silent, slides it into their slot, and then they don't get it again until they're leaving the class. That way, there's no temptation to actually bring it out and start using it in class. I don't know what the other flip side of that is. It would be if parents do need to get in touch with their children, that would put extra burden on the administrative staff at the office to take in more phone calls, go find the kid, have them get their cell phone. So that's all something to get, that would need to have more research done with it. But personally, I am not for cell phones in classrooms. Granted, I didn't have a cell phone until I was in college, so.
Yeah.
But I definitely had college professors that would take your phone if it rang.
That's old school.
Yeah. Would you back a teacher up from taking who took a cell phone away from a student?
Do they get it back at the end of class?
Probably.
Yeah.
But it depends, it probably depends on how they, what the response is.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, thank you both for taking the time tonight.
Did you want to get the cell phone?
Do you want me to answer about cell
Oh,
phones?
my apologies.
That's all right. It's okay. Newton High School and a couple of others recently implemented the use of those clear Ziploc bags that are like magnetized so that you find at concerts. Those, granted, it would be an expense, but I am on board with those because you can still see the phone. You could still see if a parent were to need to get access to you. A lot of the kids in the older grades have access to Chromebooks. If a parent needed to send an email, they could do that instead. Most of us have smartphones. We could email our kid if it was a true emergency. Or just coming up with a policy that allows for some form of balance. And I also think that setting a policy that makes those rules, blaming paper is a lot easier than blaming people. So if you have a couple of teachers that don't allow phones and a couple more that are less loose, or more loose, less restrictive, that's when you wind up with more of the power struggles and, well, so-and-so lets me do it, and then it's unclear. So I think that coming up with a blanket policy is the best practice, regardless of what that policy is. Now, thank you.
Thank you. To end on a high note, thank you for taking the time, both of you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So our next group of candidates will be running for the Winthrop Town Council. I'd like to welcome up to the stage, in any order that they would like, Council President James Lettieri, Mr. Todd Sacco, and Mr. Max Tassinari.
I'll move out.
I'm going to do it for you guys. Council President Lettieri is running for re-election, and both Mr. Sacco and Mr. Tassinari are running for the open at-large position on the town council. I'm going to give the floor to Council President Lettieri, do a brief 2-minute introduction, and then we'll just go right down the line.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the WTA not only for putting on this event, but how active they are within our community. It's greatly appreciated. And this is also a great way for the public, as stated earlier, to get a more personal glimpse into the candidates. My name is Jim Lettieri, and I'm running for re-election as Winthrop Town Council President. And by virtue of that position, I'm technically also running for the Winthrop School Committee. When we created the town charter almost 20 years ago now, and I see former Councilor Gill in the room, who was part of that commission as well. One of the major things we talked about was to have that very important link between the town and the schools, and how we accommodated that was to say that the council president would also be a member of the school committee and a full voting member and have all the rights and privileges of all the other candidates do. So I think that that's important. You know, we've had many people run for council president. It's always, you're running for council president, you're running for council president, but you're also running for the school committee. I take that responsibility quite seriously and have enjoyed every minute of that incredible opportunity. Very fortunately for me, I'm running unopposed, which is, you know, I'd like to think it's a reflection of the town's support for the efforts I've put in and for the results we've shown, but I understand more likely it's just that nobody else wants the job, right? But, and all kidding aside, as was also stated earlier, I think it's important to acknowledge the candidates that have put their name on a ballot. And to put your name on a ballot, especially in a small town, it is not an easy thing to do. So I'm very happy, and I applaud each and every candidate here for putting your name on a ballot. It takes a lot of guts to do that in a small town. I've been on the town council since its inception, almost 20 years now, and I'm truly honored that I've had the opportunity to serve the town I love. My wife Dawn has been a teacher in the Winthrop Public School System for 39 years. We have 2 grown children, Jake and Jenna. Is that 2 minutes, huh?
You just can't.
How many more kids are there, just to finish the family at least? Yeah.
No, that's it for the kids, but that's all right.
Thank you, Council President. Mr. Tassinari?
I'm Max Tassinari. Thank all of you for giving some of your time tonight to come and hear us answer some questions, some very important questions to the town. Thank you to the WTA and its representatives who are putting this on tonight. A little bit about myself. I'm a dad, I'm a husband, and I am a dedicated resident of Winthrop. I built a 15-year career in accounting, budgeting, and finance on hard work, integrity, and forward thinking. And that's what I want to bring to the town. I want to bring that experience, I want to bring that perspective, and I want to bring some fresh ideas in going out and trying to grow the available pie in terms of what is available to us in revenue. And I think key to that is seeking some more state and federal aid out there. And I know that the council president and Manager Marino have been out there doing that. I think they have a good start, and I'd like to be part of growing that effort. Thank you.
First, I too want to thank the WTA for inviting me to this and putting this on. Thank you for WCAT for coming here to get this recorded so the people of Winthrop could see it. Thank you for all our esteemed guests for showing up. My name is Todd Sacco. I'm running for council at large. I am a half a century plus resident of this community. In that half a century, for the last 25 plus years, I've been paying attention to local politics. I have served on the school committee. I have served on the ordinance review committee. I have helped to, during my time on the school committee, I had the good fortune of being able to help lower user fees, add back a writing program. We had a Latin program, and we settled a teacher's contract. We added a bus program, and we did all of this without laying off a single teacher. I don't have that ability here on the town council, but what I do have on the town council is the ability to fight for a budget to go to the school committee. And we'll talk, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit later about Chapter 70 funding. So thank you.
Why don't we just work backwards? We'll start with you, Mr. Sacco. The elephant in the room is obviously the old middle school building. The elephant in the town is obviously the old middle school building. What is your opinion on how to deal with the old middle school building? And like, if you know, how would the town and its citizens benefit from your plan on that?
Well, first of all, I want to know why it's an elephant in the room. I mean, this is a simple question. We have to find a way, right, to stop spending 70 grand a year and start generating revenue. I'm not the council president. I wouldn't be the council president. So there's already an idea in place, and that's the idea I support. I want to clear up some misinformation about that. We do know there are people interested in this. We also know that if this goes through, regardless of the success of the program, it will be a $250,000 swing, give or take, to the good of our overall budget. We'll stop spending 70 grand a year on a beat-up building. We'll be collecting money from the developers. That is guaranteed money. These are big companies. So even if the program doesn't work, they're liable to us under contract. So I do support that, and I think it'll help the residents of Winthrop because it's going to help store owners if some store owners might have, or gym owners might have options to bring their gyms in there. There'll be ice time and court time for the local sports teams. This, to me, is a no-brainer.
Good. Mr. Tassinari, what is your opinion on how to use that middle school and what to do with it?
I think the middle school discussion would benefit from a more robust involvement of the community. I think that doing things in a rushed way, similar to how a lot of people are feeling about the firehouse, that following one path right away, because that's the only option that's out there right now, is not the best use of everybody's time, maybe not the best use of that area. I would urge the council to revisit that 2018 Citizens Committee study. There's a lot of hours put into that by volunteers from this community. We should revisit that. We should refresh that with new ideas from new residents in this town. And I think we should also put in the mix the council president's plan. I think that it's a good plan to go out and get more information on, see who'd be interested, what they'd have to offer, and add it to the mix. But I don't think that the town residents, the citizens of the town, should be ignored in the process.
Right. President Lettieri.
Thank you. I try to talk quicker now. It's been vacant for 7 years.
Yeah.
I don't think we've rushed anything. Unfortunately, I think we've been the opposite of that. We've had several ideas been vetted. We looked at hotels, we looked at apartment units, we looked at condominium units, we looked at micro units for businesses. We talked to community colleges to see if they'd like an annex. We've talked to Northeastern BU to see if they would like an annex. And then it comes to the cost of the project. I promoted something, and I am proposing something that would be a public-private partnership with a sports entity that would come in. They would do much-needed infrastructure work that we need very greatly and we don't want to pay for. It would also have room for 3 or 4 townhouses at the top, which would generate about $50,000 in tax revenue. And it would also be a project where we would get rent, we would continue to own the land, it would be continued to use for recreational use, it would be an incredible economic stimulus for our town businesses, and it would be a revenue generator for the town. Also, the biggest thing it does, too, is it doesn't put the burden on the schools. We have to be very wary. We have 3 relatively new schools, right, 20 years old, which in this town is brand new. But they're almost at capacity, and I don't want to say that, saying we can't take another 3 students, but we have a middle high school that was built for $995 that has over that already in it now. We have room, and that's why we have to be careful when we're looking at programs, too. We want to do increased programs, but we need the space to do it, and we need the staffing to do it, too. But I think my plan is very well thought out. I know it has interest. I think it's something that we need to take to the next step. In 2018, there was a plan brought forward. It was going to be funded privately. The organization was given 6 months to take a look to see what they got financing. They never, ever got back to us, never heard another word about it. The town can't build a hockey rink for $20 million. We don't have the money to do that, I don't think. We're trying to get this firehouse project off, which is #1 on the priority list. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the sake of fairness, I'm going to ask my next question, and we'll start with Mr. Tassinari first. In your view, what are the 3 most critical issues facing the Winthrop Public Schools?
I would say funding would be the 3 most critical issues facing the Winthrop Public Schools. But what is that funding, what would that funding bring, or what are the results of that funding? It's resources, retention, and recruitment. Those are the 3 biggest issues I see, not just in Winthrop Public Schools, but in public schools all over the nation, really. There's a lack of resources here. There's a retention problem, as we've just heard from the 2, one committee member and one prospective committee member. And there's an issue with recruitment. There's a teacher shortage, not just here in Winthrop, not just for our public schools, but all over the nation. And a lot of that's due to burnout, and who can blame people after the pandemic? It wasn't an easy time for anyone. It certainly was very difficult for educators and teachers. My best idea to bring revenue in, to improve those resources, is really to grow the pie as much as possible. I really don't want to see services taken away from the rest of the town to feed the school budget, but we all know that that school budget's not going to make it every year. So what we need to do is bring in more resources, and the council president's plan actually for the middle school sounds like it's going to bring in some more resources. But we also have to look outside this town for advocates and allies at the state level, at the federal level, to bring in some grant programs, maybe to remember Winthrop when they're writing legislation and grant opportunities, and benefit from our income tax dollars that go elsewhere.
Mr. Sackos, same question. What are the 3 most critical issues do you think facing Winthrop Public Schools?
Yeah, at the risk of agreeing with my opponent, I would say funding, for starters, and I would also agree that there's a teacher shortage that we have to deal with, which is creating a problem, and that's parlaying into a third problem, which is class size. Not to mention, we had some recent new students put into our school either at the end of last year, or early this year, or both, that require more English language learning resources, and we don't really have those either. So the one thing I mean, again, we're on the council, we can't really do a lot with the budget, but one thing we can do as a council is vote to ensure that all of the Chapter 70 money goes to education, because that's what it's supposed to be for. Unfortunately, it doesn't, and it's completely legal that it doesn't, but budgets are fungible. And at the end of the day, we're going to be getting from Chapter 70 monies, the Commonwealth is fully supporting the Student Opportunity Act funding. So that's going to increase our funding from $8 million to about $9.73 million in Chapter 70 funding. I will vote to ensure that that all goes to education, and we don't do the accounting tricks where we take it, we say, okay, here's all your $8 million or $9 million from Chapter 70, but what we were going to give you out of the general fund will be reduced by $9 million. That's an accounting trick that won't happen without me saying something about that.
Mr. Lettieri, same question.
Thank you. Again, that's kind of an easy one with funding, right? We always need more money. Staffing and student population, I think, is a big one also. Staff, I don't think we necessarily, I don't feel, we necessarily have a problem with retention. We have some incredibly great teachers, right? Gone, unfortunately, are the years where you have teachers that are here for 30-plus years and they all live in Winthrop. Those days, unfortunately, are probably gone for the most part. But we have an incredible group of teachers, and we have an incredible administrative staff. I think if you look back 10 years ago when teachers just stayed here for life, and they were getting paid a lot less money than they're getting paid now. Not that the salaries are where we want them or where they could be or should be, but they're definitely much better than they were. So I think our retention, the issue there is some people are going for different opportunities. They're not necessarily just going for the system, they're going for the dollars, right? Instead of, we might not offer the same dollars as some other districts, but we offer an incredible benefit package with health care at 85%, which is unheard of these days. So that's a fantastic thing that we have to offer. So staffing is always tough, and we want to increase new programs, but to try, and I'm a huge proponent of Latin. I think it just helps in so many ways. Not that the kids are going to go out and speak Latin, but it helps them when they're taking their testing. It helps them in English and phonics and such. But again, it's finding those specialty teachers. The other thing we have to be cognizant of is the state. There are so many state mandates that we just don't get the funding for. They just keep adding additional mandates without adding additional funding, and that's where the problem, I think, lies. So we have to look at that, especially certain segments of our population in the schools. We have to make sure that we're getting the adequate funding that we need from the state. If they're going to increase mandates, they need to increase fundings. But usually it's that same pot of money. So if it's coming, they're going to to give us more here, they're taking it away there. And the state is doing so much with the MSBA. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars are going to building new schools because we're fortunate. We were a little proactive in that, in one area anyway, and we were able to build those schools. And now you'll see other schools building now, which is taking a lot of resources from the state.
So, understanding that it is the town council, not the school committee, what items or areas would you financially prioritize if you guys were given the power to create a school budget, have massive input into the school budget? Is there anything you would cut or de-emphasize? Where do you stand on that? We'll start with you, Mr. President.
Yeah, and again, just to go back, like you just said, the council appropriates the money, right? So the council is the appropriating body. The school, in our terms, is a bottom line budget. So we give them X amount of dollars, we can't tell them how to spend it, right? But maybe I'm in a little more unique position because I'm on the school committee too, right? So it's a little bit different, but the superintendent does an incredible job, and especially trying to, again, be proactive and start the budget process earlier and earlier so we could really see the needs. If you get too late, then, everything gets thrown to the wall and let's see what sticks. And we can't do that anymore. And I think the superintendent has taken the initiative to get us started much earlier in the budget. I would really like to focus on increasing some programs such as, which has been said before, languages. I just think it's so important, especially in this day and age. That gives our kids opportunities that they might not have if they don't have that flexibility. Theater, arts, stuff that has kind of gone away. Band, which was, I think Lane spoke about it earlier. Athletics, these are all very important parts. Education needs to be well-rounded. It's, I'm a very big proponent. Math, English, social studies, science, history, that you need. But it's more than that. It's a well-rounded education, and it's not, you can't put all the burden on the teachers either. It's parents need a responsibility. These kids are in school a third of the day. The parents need to take, more of a responsibility in that also. But we have to fight for more money for education for the kids. There's no doubt about that.
I think next, Mr. Sacco, why don't you chime in on that?
I mean, he steals the thunder. Look, we all know funding, we've already talked about it. We're operating on a shoestring budget. I can't give the administration, the school committee, and the faculty, quite frankly, enough credit for getting by with what you have. There's nothing I would ever de-emphasize. Like the council president said, I've been griping about language for a long time. I was appalled when I found out Spanish took a break in middle school. My kids lost the opportunity to keep their foreign language growth and development going because we don't have the funding. So I get it, and I'd say it again. I will vote as a member of the council to ensure that all Chapter 70 funds go to the school, to education.
Mr. Tasneri?
I can't disagree with either one of these gentlemen. What I would do in terms of...
We'll find a way.
Give it time.
What I would add, though, is I would like to see a fully funded needs-based budget made available to the school committee and to the superintendent. That's what I'd advocate for. That's what I'd try to pull from our advocates outside of the town. And it's a lot of work because Mr. Sacco said it. We're operating on a shoestring budget, so.
Out of curiosity, and just because it's come up so often, more languages, earlier languages, both? All. Okay.
All.
Good.
Please, more.
No, you have to start earlier.
Yeah.
You have to start in the formative years, early years, middle school years. Absolutely.
Staying on the topic of the town budget, so just in the last question, there was a lot of referencing of, the role of the town council in terms of school budgets and just kind of voting on the whole line item as a whole. But this past fiscal year, the current fiscal year, I should say, that we're in, is the 6th year in a row where Winthrop Public Schools did not receive the needs-based funding proposed by the superintendent and supported by the school committee. The fiscal year 24 town budget alone falls short by over $1.5 million. What is your assessment of the town budget, particularly the consistent level service, and not the needs-based funding allocated to WPS? We'll start with Mr. Sacco.
Okay. I mean, what more can you say about this budget issue? It's terrible that we can't fully fund a needs-based budget. I agree with, God, I hate saying that. I agree with Max where we should be, that should be our goal. But we have other departments. I mean, the schools can't function without safety. The town can't function without safety. And our first responders have gone without. Our first responders in our DPW departments have gone without far more than any other department in this town. They've made the sacrifice, the fire department especially. 60 years, not 50, not 30, there's been some misinformation about there. This has been going on for 60 years. So all that being said, the question asked is the question finishes with, do you foresee the need for a budget or a levy override? Let's just cut to the chase. I've been saying all along that people should decide. I disagree with trash fees. I think the people should be voting on that stuff. Fees are an end run around the 2.5 override. The people should decide. However, the flip side of that is, we're supposed to live within our budget, and we don't. Even though we don't have enough stuff, we still overspend in our budget, and it's always crunch time. We've been lucky the last few years because we've had ARPA money sitting around, we've had all kinds of money because of COVID. But the chickens are coming home to roost, and it's probably going to be not this year, but next year. So yes, I would put it on the ballot and let the people decide. It's their money.
Mr. Tassinari, you already made a comment, I believe, on the school budget. Would you like to comment on the foresight of a needs levy limit override, Prop 2.5?
There's definitely a fiscal cliff coming for the town, school and on whole. And that's why we need to be out ahead of that, advocating, working with our state senators, our state representatives, to gain some footholds in what they can do for us in terms of what we call earmarks, what we call grant opportunities. At the state level, we need them to help us advocate at the federal level too. We have our congresswoman is pretty well situated in Washington to make some of those things happen for this town. And we should be out there working with her, working with our state senator, working with our state rep to bring some more funding into this town, because what we have available to us is very limited. We've talked about restrictions on revenue in terms of it's really just us here in this room and the folks who are paying into the property tax in this town that fund our whole budget. So we need to be out there looking for more revenue resources.
So I have a couple of follow-ups, if I may, and then talk about the budget override potential with Council President. Mr. Tassinari, since you just finished, I do have a follow-up related to just kind of a, 30,000-foot view. So some of the community see you as an outsider or not truly a member of the Winthrop community. I feel for you. I, too, am an outsider and have been referred to as such by, members of the town. How will you overcome this barrier as a newcomer if you were to be elected to the council? Do you think that it'll harm your ability in any way to govern and pursue your agenda?
I don't think so, no. I may be viewed as an outsider by some folks, but I've been around this town my whole life. I only grew up 1.5 miles away. It's really not that far. So I got to get off the island once in a while. I think what will help me help the town are the relationships that I've built outside of this town over the last 20 years, being involved in local politics, being involved in national politics, being involved in state politics, working, having professional relationships at all those places, having professional relationships in the business community and in the nonprofit sector. I think we're all, at the end of the day, trying to get to the same goal. So if we're all kind of working together, and I have no problem working with either of these two gentlemen, no problem working with any of the folks who are sitting on that side of the room to get to where we need to be in terms of revenue collection to support our town.
Mr. Sacco, I have a follow-up question for you as well, kind of again a 30,000-foot view. You mentioned in a speech earlier this week the need for parents in the community to become better partners with educators, school staff. Could you describe a recent moment when you've been a partner to the Winthrop teacher community?
Recent moment?
Yeah.
How recent you want it?
Any moment.
I mean,
Any moment.
my speech about parents was all about ensuring that when the child goes to school, the child behaves and is respectful, does their homework. That's what I'm talking about. We're the type of parents who want to make sure that we're partners with our teachers. Now, my wife handles most of that. She's got the schedule that can do it. However, that's the point. When I served on the school committee back in 2010 to 2013, one of my failed initiatives, I'll admit it didn't go anywhere, was to increase parent engagement. That, to me, is the best thing we can do for teachers, because when they're dealing with chaotic classrooms and kids not doing their homework and failing, they're shouldering some of the blame for that. And so, in my view, the most important thing the parents can do for the teachers is support those children, get them to school on time, and teach them to be respectful.
Council President Lettieri, would you like to comment on the possibility of a, quote, fiscal cliff, and your thoughts on a Proposition 2.5 budget override?
Well, I think cliff might be a little exaggerated, but yeah, COVID was so crazy in so many ways, right? I mean, obviously the disease itself, the learning loss, the emotional stress of kids and adults, but it also gave us, in some respects, a little windfall that's pretty much gone now, right? We have, this is basically it for this fiscal year, right? So, and that's the issue, going back to looking for money from, we have to depend on ourselves. And I think that's the way you just got to go through life. You can't count on somebody else to bail you out all the time. And looking at one-time monies here and there, it might be great for a short term, but it doesn't sustain us, right? So that's when you have to look into revenue sources. Now, there's two ways to get revenue. You either increase it towards some development projects or such, or something like I was proposing at the middle school, or you do an override, right? We did an override way back, and Mr. Gill will remember back in '05, and we looked at a $6 million override and just said, hey, we just want $6 million because we think we need it. And it failed miserably. And then we went back and we did a lot of work, and we said, hey, let's put something together that says, hey, let's go back and let the people say. And we went, schools, this is why they need X amount of money. Police, this is why they need it. School, we had a menu item and we had 9 items on it and 8 of them passed. People in this town are over-generous in a lot of ways, and they'll support if they feel that the money's going to the right place, and if they feel they have the faith and confidence in the people in these positions to do the right things with the money. The schools are underfunded, but Winthrop schools are not the only schools underfunded. They're all underfunded. So there's not going to be this, which I'd love to have, I'd love to be able to say that no knight in shining armor is going to come in and give us a pocket full of money. It's just not going to happen. So we have to be sustained. We have to learn to get on our own 2 feet and take care of ourselves. But yeah, so yes, is there a funding need? There absolutely is. We just have to make sure we understand exactly what we're looking for.
Can I just make one comment? Because I hear the underfunded thing, and I want to make a statement here. To me, underfunded means don't spend it. So are we underfunded or are we overspending? We can have that argument all day long, but the simple fact is the people of Winthrop have said, here's how much you get. If you need more, you should ask. So I think when we talk about calling it underfunded, it gives an out for our elected officials. It gives them an out. They're responsible to make sure this works, including the school committee. So I think we should stop calling it underfunded, and I think we should say that our elected officials should do a better job. Also communicating shortages and being clear about it. Thank you.
And just to...
Given
recap that, if
the,
I-
yeah, you can respond. Yeah.
Fair enough.
When I say underfunded, I don't mean the schools are underfunded. I do mean the schools are underfunded, but every one of our departments is underfunded and could use more money. The schools aren't the only ones that ask for money that they don't get, right? Every department asks for more money than they get in the end. Again, we have to learn, as I said, we have to learn to live within our budget, right? Which we do. The schools do. We have never shut down a day because we don't have enough money to open the doors. We haven't not had heat because we don't pay the bills. We do what we can, and, you know, sometimes that's almost bad when you're asking for $1.5 million extra dollars, and then you go through the year and parents say, did they really need that? My kid still got an education, my kid still played sports, my kid still was under theater. You know, so we have to, again, we're trying to enhance, we're trying to make enhancements with that money. It's just not a need to get through day to day, it's a need to get a little above and beyond what we want to get. Do we want to be average? No, we don't want to be average. I don't want to be average. I don't want my kids to be average. You want more, but you want to do it in the right way, right?
Good timing. Well done, Jim.
Well, we have no more questions for you three, so thank you guys for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Oh, everyone thinks it's over.
At this point, we'd like to welcome up our second group of Winthrop Town Council candidates, and that would be School Committee member Suzanne Swope and Mr. John DeRoss.
Just two of us.
We'll be short. We'll be shorter.
The quick one.
Yep. Either they're very.
It moves.
It moves.
You can be in stereo. I mean, if you try them both.
Please.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Swope. I've been here since 2007. I don't feel like an outsider because I've been going to work here on the school committee, so I've been here for forever, but it's been great. I started professionally with a doctorate from BU in education. My life has been spent in education. Then went to Emerson College, where I was I was on the faculty for a while, tenured faculty member, and then I went and became a dark side person going to administration. I never say that if you're a faculty member. But I had kind of a lot of responsibility there in different ways. So I ran physical plant, I ran personnel, I worked on marketing, I worked on admissions and registration financially. So I've done that at Emerson. I went to George Mason, which is a large public, came back to Boston because I just couldn't live without it. And so I came back to Emerson and worked there for a while. I also have loved my time on the school committee. It's my sixth year. And I think we've gotten a lot done there, thanks to Superintendent Howard and a great staff and the teachers. We've improved the curriculum. We've made the budget transparent. We've really, I think, improved significantly in that. And my final job here is a grandparent. It's more challenging than any of the other ones. And I started when they were 1 and 3, and now they're 10 and 12. Good luck to all of you who have
Thank you, Committee Member Swope. Mr. DeRoss?
I didn't realize how much we had in common. Hello, everyone. My name's John DeRoss. I live in Precinct 6 on Coral Avenue in the middle of the beach streets, as they call it. I'm a newbie to Winthrop. I've been here 5.5 years, but I've heard it needs to be a lot longer than that for you not to be called a newbie. I'm from Worcester originally, and I too have education, especially higher education, in my blood and my background. My parents met when they both worked at Holy Cross. My dad was the assistant dean of students, and my mom worked in the athletic department. So I grew up a Holy Cross brat in Worcester, loving Holy Cross sports. But then we moved to Waterville, Maine, when I was in elementary school. So I know John Munson here tonight also has a Maine background as well. So I'm sure you feel the same. I have Lewiston, Maine on my mind and in my heart right now. So I hope we're all sending thoughts, prayers, and actions up to the great state of Maine. So I did also start my career in higher education. So after graduating from Waterville High, I think we had a student class president in the room earlier. I was the senior class president at Waterville, so
There you go.
not always an easy job to bring cliques together in a high school, but I tried to do my best. Went to the University of Maine at Orono, got a political science degree, then went on to Miami of Ohio. Yes, there is a Miami in Ohio in addition to the one in Florida. I got a higher education administration degree, and my first job was as the assistant dean of students at the University of Richmond in Virginia. So circle back to now, I spent 8 years living in Melrose, and I'm sure most of you have been to Melrose, beautiful town, but I always wanted to live by the beach. So after a quick little sabbatical in Napa Valley, I always wanted to work in the wine industry, so I did it for a year, and then I moved to Winthrop, and have loved it. I'm on the licensing board of the town for the past 2 years. Know the businesses pretty well, and I work in the corporate world in sales for a data and analytics firm, so I do lots of sales pitches and contract negotiations for a living, usually 6, 7, 8-figure contracts. So I'm hoping to bring that skill to the town as well.
You can bring that. So we'll start out with, it's going to be most of the same questions as the last group, just for consistency's sake. You obviously, we'll start with you, Ms. Swope. The middle school has been something you've been dealing with as a school committee member as well. What is your plan, and how would you sell the community on that?
Well, I've looked at Mr. Lettieri's plan. I think that's really an interesting one. I think that should go into the mix. But I am for writing an RFP. I am for making sure that we have a few choices to make in that arena. I'm not sure that's the best one. I have talked to several people about rinks. Sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not. I mean, anything we do there that's going to be revenue generating, we hope that it will work. I mean, I think first and foremost, that's the goal in building anything in that middle school. But to make it work, we've got to have the right plan, and then we've got to make sure that we oversee it well as the town. So I'm all for starting with that, with Jim's plan, seeing what that looks like, but also writing an RFP and seeing who else we might be able to attract.
Mr. Ross, what is your opinion on how to deal with the middle school, and how would you sell the town on that?
First of all, let me thank Council President Lettieri. There's been a lot of hard work going into that. I have written lots of proposals and put forth lots of plans, mostly for my corporate clients, and it takes a long time. So thank you to all the effort that you've put in. I think that coming from a place of working for a firm that specializes in facts and data and helping my financial services clients make decisions based on facts and data, especially when big investment dollars are at play. I would agree with what Suzanne just said. There are two tools that are at our disposal. RFP, request for proposal, when you are ready to actually put that proposal out, very specific. So it could be the athletic complex, for example. A step before that often is a wise one to take, is an RFI, request for information. And RFIs can contain more than one idea. So I remember being at a town council meeting, and we were discussing this, and I remember Lisa Alberghini and a couple of other folks who were involved in the group back in 2018 or so that looked at plans for the middle school, also folks that were involved in the central business district planning. You know, they kind of chimed in and said, you know what, there were a few good ideas in all of that work that we did back then, and before we make a decision as a town, maybe it's worth it to have an RFI that goes out with, say, our top 2 or 3 choices, make a decision on that with public hearings, et cetera, as a town, and then go out to RFP with our number 1 opportunity, which may very well be the sports complex. I grew up playing hockey, so I have to separate myself a little bit, my personal inclinations from, I would love to see as many hockey rinks as possible. But I think that's an important step, because economic viability is something that's very important to take into consideration. So we should make that decision knowing we've done our homework and we know that this option that we choose is going to be economically successful.
Awesome. Thank you.
We'll continue with you. In your view, Mr. DeRoss, what are the 3 most critical issues facing the Winthrop Public Schools?
I think a lot of them have been talked about. I think one thing that struck me earlier that I kind of recently learned, going to Waterville High School in Maine, I had the option of Spanish, French, Latin, I think we had Italian at one point, maybe. Latin I loved it. I took 4 years of Latin, and someone mentioned, I don't know if Todd mentioned this, or Jim mentioned this, but Latin, obviously you're not going to walk out the door and speak Latin most often, but it's amazing in your work life, in your personal life, how often that base structure of understanding Latin comes in handy. My father's side is Italian, and my grandfather spoke fluent Italian. If I had to do over again, I would have accepted his invitation every time to sit down and learn Italian from my grandfather. I neglected to do that, and today I don't speak it, and I regret it. So foreign language is a huge piece that I'd like to see funded. I have heard in talking to people on the school committee and in the Teachers Association that ESL is an important issue for our English language learners that we have not funded yet. I think the last thing I would say is special education. I, every year, do the 100-mile Best Buddies bike ride from Boston to Hyannisport. I have members of my family who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, and for 7 years I've done that ride, and I'm also involved in getting my company to be a jobs program participant with Best Buddies. So when I think about what we need around making sure that people with special needs, kids with special needs, that we fully fund that on all levels, whether it's IDD or physical ability issues, incredibly important in order to have an inclusive school committee, the school community.
Did you ask, I just want to make sure, you asked the question of 3 critical issues around Winthrop. Is that what you meant?
Winthrop Public Schools.
Oh,
but I'd be happy to give you the option to choose the town more broadly if you'd like.
Now I have to have more time. Let's go with the Winthrop Public Schools then. I guess there's 3 that I would suggest that we need. It's revenue, policy, and attracting and retaining quality teachers. Let me start with revenue. We've talked a lot about it, but our per pupil funding is a lot less than most other areas. For example, and I use niche as a guideline here, but there are other ways in which you can calculate funding. But when niche compares us to some community like Saugus, we're funding at $18,473. Saugus is $23,302. And I could go on down the list. It's incredible the number of communities that are much higher in per pupil funding. Secondly, policy. You know, we're working on policy right now. In fact, the committee is analyzing all these policy issues, and we're working with the state so that we have a whole packet of policies that are clearly written, that people understand, that are electronic, and we can keep up with them as policies change over time. And I think that's important so that everybody understands what the rules of the road are. Because if they don't understand the rules of the road, then it's very hard to hold people accountable. And the third one, of course, is attracting and retaining quality teachers. We currently have 24.7% of our teachers that are first and second year teachers. That's a lot. So we've replaced a lot. And I think, I don't know if Todd, one of you all said it, it's not just the funding. I mean, they're leaving education because they don't want to teach anymore, as an example. I'm finishing.
Ms. Swope, I'd like to ask you a follow-up related to your kind of three major points there. Do you feel as though there's been I don't want to say passing the buck necessarily, but do you feel as though there's been this distance between the priorities of the town council and the school budget versus what you and your peers on the school committee had been proposing over these last few years?
You know, before I started thinking about this job, I didn't talk to as many people that work for the town. We talked among ourselves. There's no question that we need more money in the schools. But if you talk to the firefighters, they, in some instances, they're getting paid $10,000 less after working here 10 years than the Revere firefighters that have worked 1 year. That's just not, that's not right. And so it's our lack of revenue that's a problem. And unless we come together as a town on this, if we start thinking town gown problems, we'll never make it. We've got to get funding we've got to get grant funding, and we already have over $1 million in grant funding thanks to Lisa and Lori. They work like heck on that. But we have to do that for the town, we have to do that for the schools, and we have to come together as a commitment.
Mr. Ross, if you were to wave a magic wand and set up a school budget on your own, obviously it's from a town council perspective, not a school committee perspective, but what kinds of areas would you prioritize? What would you deprioritize, et cetera?
I don't know that I'll have a lot on the deprioritized list, especially coming from an education background. I'm going to be heavy on the prioritization. I mentioned a couple of things earlier. You know, ESL, foreign language, huge. When I went to my first school committee meeting, it was actually the night that I think the teacher aide contract was up for, yeah, Lisa's having like horror story flashbacks about that one.
Yeah.
But I remember looking at the teachers and the teacher aides in the room who filled the Harvey room that night, and being in corporate America for the last 20 years, I just looked at them and I said, I see the effects in my company, in other companies, of people who have not had the skills early on that they needed to build into their careers and kind of had to play catch up a lot within the corporate setting to kind of get what they needed. And that's both technical skills as well as more kind of liberal arts-based skills. And so I basically said, without the success of the school system and teachers, and obviously student outcomes, and I agree with what Lane was saying earlier, that MCAS tests are only one way to measure student outcomes. There are a lot of ways to measure that. You know, we would be in a bad place in a lot of ways, including in the corporate world that I spend a lot of my time in. So, you know, the priority for me, and it was said repeatedly earlier, is just funding. I know that there are ways we can look at teacher compensation right now and say, okay, well, we're not that bad. There are maybe some communities that are, you know, a little worse off. I think as a country, the priority and value we place on compensating educators is way below where it should, and we experience the net effect of that in many ways, including the corporate world. So my priority would just be funds, 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 and
More fun.
and money in their wallet to keep them, to your point, keep them here and retained.
There you go. Ms. Swope, did you have anything to add on that? Or?
Yeah, a couple things. I agree. I mean, we've all said it, so we got to figure that out. But it's easier said than done, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, but I would think about more curriculum opportunities, whether it's, you all mentioned it before, a band, for example, more languages, more finance. We might even add some other athletics to the middle school things. That would be good. Greater support for helping for health, social, and emotional issues, and more wraparound services for parents and teachers. I think that would be a big help. Also, we had 75 kids that came this year with no English. No English. We need more support for ELL. And there's nothing I would de-emphasize that I can think of right now.
Thank you. We'll start with Ms. Swope, kind of keep going back and forth here. As you're in an interesting position, having spent substantial amount of years on the school committee and then moving to the town council possibly in November, what's your assessment? You mentioned that you've been talking more to people in different departments. What's your assessment of the town budget? And how do you think your experience on the school committee might impact your analysis of the town budget from a more holistic view?
Well, first of all, I'm going to be biased about schools, so you're just going to have to accept that.
We're fine with that.
But what's been wonderful about coming to Winthrop is that it is a town where most of the time, people really care about each other. And it comes forward in so many interesting ways. I mean, I think somebody asked us to maybe provide some food for all the poll workers. And everybody that was, that is running said, sure, we'll do it. And you see it in the food bank, and you see it so many other places. And that comes from leadership. That doesn't just happen. That comes because enough people care in the places that are meaningful and that they make a difference and they care about each other. And just as kids, when you care about your kids, and you care about your grandchildren, guess what? You get it all back.
Well said. Well said. Mr. DeRoss.
Yes, sir.
This is a little contentious, and I understand that the general theme is the town is underfunded. We need more revenue, better way maybe to put it. But in that vein, what are your thoughts on this growing talk of not only holding a debt exclusion for the proposed new fire station, but also factoring in maybe within the next few years that there also may need to be a budget override? How do you assess the town budget from what research you've done prior to possibly being elected?
To be honest, coming from a facts and data guy, I feel like I need a lot more research. So I'm just going to be transparent and say I have not read our budget cover to cover. I have read some of it, and certainly when I meet with people in my precinct and outside of my precinct. Actually, I was just at the Feldman Apartments the other night, the 55-plus community across the street from me. About 15 people came, and they came with their lists of questions. And I'd say 2/3 of those questions had everything to do with fiscal, budget, and services provided with that budget. For me, the debt exclusion is the route that you go when you need to. To a lot of what Max said earlier, I think there are a lot of ways that revenue can be grown, both within the town, but also from grants, state and federal funding. There are a lot of funded programs right now that benefit the issues in Winthrop, whether that's infrastructure issues or funding for several other things that are on our priority that we find ourselves falling short on. And that's funding that was not necessarily there even 5-7 years ago. So to Max's point, and I've had this conversation with our state Senator Lydia Edwards, pretty extensively that there is a lot that we can do, both at the state level and the federal level. Someone mentioned our access to Catherine Clark earlier. Yes, that would be Max. Catherine Clark was at Shoreside Cafe, dropping in with her husband maybe about, a couple of months ago, and we happened to be there when she was there. And we had this conversation, and I asked her the question, do you think we tap into federal funding enough in Winthrop? And she said, kind of diplomatically, there's room there for us to be working together. So I think that's a big part. I think you really need to take in all the possible sources and use things like debt exclusion or levy issues when needed.
Okay. To just ask a follow-up, and I'll pose this to both of you. We could start with you, Mr. DeRoss. It sounds like, I believe Mr. Sacco and maybe somebody else had kind of positions on further democratizing some of our policies, removing, fees and having, I guess, taking power away from the body that you are both running for. Is that the type of position that you would also support, to further democratize and leave it to the voters, as they say?
I mean, we have a representative democracy. When I got my poli-sci degree at Maine, it's one of the things I learned. I believe in representative democracy. However, I think Todd has a point that when there are issues that directly impact wallets, particularly homeowners and property tax wallets, we do have to think about when we need to go out to a broader reach to the town and get the town to vote on issues. But I do also think that we spend a lot of time with our constituents, both in our precincts and across the town, and we are gathering that kind of input. If we're doing our job right, and while I'm on the subject, let me mention this really quick. One of my key outcomes that I want out of being on the town council, and one of the metrics I'll use to gauge success if I'm on it, is voter turnout at the next election. So in my precinct, we have about 2,200 registered voters, and only 325, roughly, consistently vote. Do the math.
Yeah.
That's about a 15% turnout, right? I've heard across Winthrop, I don't know this statistic, but I've heard town-wide, we are roughly 35%-ish, maybe a little bit higher in terms of voter turnout. So I'd love to see that number be north of 50. That's just one of many metrics where we'll know that we are more engaged. So I think if we can do that, we'll have more confidence that the representative democracy we have is as a result of us being engaged, and not just because 15% of the people in a particular precinct happen to turn out and elect somebody.
Well, I'm going to be the unpopular person. I do think we need an override. And and I think we have to educate this town about what we need it for. And we have to be very clear about it and not mince words about it, and convince people. If we can't convince them, they won't vote for it. And you won't vote for it. So, but from what I can see on the budget, I see no way out of that. And regardless of Jim's proposal, that's going to take too many years. We will hit rock bottom next year in the school committee, in the schools at least, because ESSER money's gone, and it's going to be very tough year next year. So, and with the changing demographic and everything we're facing there. So I know more about that than I do the town budget. But trash, really, I think we should pay for trash. I mean, how many barrels of trash can you put out there and ask somebody to pick it up when indeed it can't be forever? So I guess, maybe Tom said it, the chickens are coming home to roost or something like that. It's time, folks, and we might be able to figure out grants. Certainly we work on them. But if we can't figure that out, I don't want 5 teachers to be gone next year.
Thank you. I believe chickens was on the do not mention list, if you guys remember that.
Talking about chickens also.
Oh, that's right.
Chickens, I mean, it's everywhere.
That's roosting.
Well, thank you both very much for taking the time. We really appreciate it. All right, our final group of the night is our three candidates for Precinct 2. Councilor John Munson, who's running for re-election, Mr. Kurt Millar, and Mr. Mark Chapdelaine. Chapdelaine. That's it, Chap? Chapdelaine. Chap.
Well, so's what I know.
Councilor Munson, I'm going to give you the floor to start with a brief 2-minute introduction, and then we'll just go down the table.
Appreciate it, thank you. I apologize for my tardiness, but I had work to pay the bills. But my name is John Munson. I'm running for re-election for Precinct 2, Town Councilor, and I feel as though I need that extra term to get a few more things accomplished. I've been a family man here in town for the last, since 18 years ago, and moved here about 20, and I have fallen in love with this town, and subsequently a lot of family members have moved here, and this is home. I've also got a small business here. For the last 16 years I've been running a business and have thousands of happy customers. I am entrenched, if you will. So I started serving in January of 2021. So it's almost, 2022. So almost 2 years. This January will be 2 years. And it's been a pleasure, truly, working with people like you. And it's an honor. And I plan on continuing to serve the town of Winthrop, working together with everybody, not just partisan politics, but working with everybody for the betterment of Winthrop.
Hello, my name's Kurt Millar. My family, and hi there. And my family's been in this town for many generations. I don't ride on the waves of family name or who's done what in town. I'm riding on my own name and what I can accomplish and what I have accomplished. I've been through the Winthrop Public Schools. My daughter has also. My son is in Florida. He didn't get to go through it, but generations also have gone through. So understanding the budget and how things work is very important. I do manage a $7 million budget at my job right now, and I have to answer for every dollar that's spent or lost and do a full gap analysis against it. And I feel that that's what's needed right now with our budgeting, not just for the school, but for the town itself. I've dug into the budget, looked at different lines in the budget, brought up the water use in town, and identified that there was a gap in there, that, the hockey rink wasn't, paying water, there was no meter on it. So I am actually looking into the EB Newton now to identify gaps there. It's probably well known that I was not for the town running a ferry. I felt it was kind of, we should be in line with the MBTA. So that's what I've done. I ran last time. I didn't make it. But I made a commitment at that time that I would still stay committed to the town. I was appointed to 2 charter ordinance review committees, which shared with Mr. Chapdelaine over here. He was the chair on one of them, Jeff Turco on the other. And I'm also currently on the Board of License that Mr. Lettieri appointed me to. And I've learned a lot from this over the past few years. And I actually am looking forward to learn more and move the town forward.
Good evening. My name is Mark Chapdelaine, and I too am a candidate for Precinct 2 Town Council. I got my start working for public education in 1998 for Senator Kennedy, and I worked for my semester abroad. I went down to Washington and served on his education subcommittee. One of the things that occurred there was I learned about public education and the difficult funding. And in 1998, just 25 years ago, we were still fighting for every dollar. So I hear a ton of negativity of how we're reaching a cliff and we're not going to make it. That negativity has no place here. We need to find solutions. Our job, and the reason why we're running to be elected, is to find solutions. I'm an attorney by trade. Every single day, I get a new problem dumped on my lap, and we find solutions. That's what our job is, and I'm hoping to earn votes of the people of Precinct 2 so that I can take my knowledge base and bring it to the town council and bring us some solutions instead of showing everybody what our issues are and why we're going to have such a difficult time making it through.
So we'll start with the middle school, as we have. What are your ideas about the middle school, and how would you get the town to support your ideas?
So the middle school is one of the big reasons I got into this race. I think the town council president has a great foundation for what an idea can work. I have some great concerns about it. One is access. We can build the greatest building in the world, and if our students and our residents don't have access to it, it's a worthless, giant monstrosity at the end of Pauline Street. Next is who's paying for it. If a developer is going to come in and borrow $20 million of the bank's money to build a building, what happens if they fail? What if they're wrong? What if their projections don't come? Again, it does us no good of a building that's sitting in bankruptcy court that we can't have access to. The third is bringing in some money with it. And while I do like the idea that there's going to be a basketball, 4 basketball courts, and those basketball courts, the developer believes can raise some good money with AAU tournaments and other ideas, I think we need more boxes built by that developer that we can rent as a town to a gymnastics or to a gym or to the arts upstairs. I just left my daughter Maya, brought her some water. She's up at the dance academy that does an amazing job teaching our kids. So we have so many great resources here, and if we can bring them to that middle school site, I think there's a lot we could do that can really bring some much-needed revenue to the town, but more importantly, improve the quality of life of the people in this town. In February, we should be able to go run on a beautiful track that's indoors. We should be able to go out and find a swimming pool, someone to manage it, and somebody like the YMCA that could come in and give us just that piece. We don't have to come to the YMCA for a $50 million project. It could be just that small piece of this. So I do think the middle school needs to be a first-class, world-class facility, and anything less than that, I think, is a abrogation of our duty as counselors.
Mr. Millar, same question. What's your opinion on what to do with the old middle school?
So a few years ago, a group of us got together and started a vision and sharing group. They had started online on Facebook, and it was all trying to identify, what could potentially go there. I think one of the things we lack in our town is a vision of who we are and what type of town we are. I think we're a little lacking there. So yes, I think the sports complex is great. We're well known for our food in town. I mean, a lot of people come here for that. I think inviting the sports complex is good. I think it's a great proposal to start with. But I also feel that we have to wait until we know the full decision on the fire station, because that might dictate changes in what happens in our town with even that property. It really does need to be a revenue for us. So might not need to be a sports complex. I mean, we've heard green space, we've heard houses, we've heard condos, micro units. What ends up happening is it's not my voice that's going to determine how I would vote for what goes in there or move. I want to hear more input because there has been so many ideas put out there, and take the sample of what everybody puts in to really identify what should go there. And yes, people are going to be happy, not happy. There's, always going to be a difference of opinion of what should go in there. But I do feel that property should be a form of revenue if we lead that way with it.
Good. And Councilor Munson, as someone who's dealt with this already on the council.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the last puzzle piece, last major puzzle piece of the Winthrop pie. We don't have a lot of public land to be offering for sale, so I think this, and as we've all said tonight, we've talked about being underfunded over and over and over again. So with that being said, you can't just put in another expense in there. You have to find revenue. So while I really like some of the parts of Jim's idea with the sports complex, I do think it needs to be more open to get the creativity, ingenuity, ideas of developers. I think that the process needs to be staged. It should be RFI after getting the input of the town. We've already got great ideas. The 2017, 2018 brainstorming session, there's wonderful ideas already out there. I will say that once that input has been heard, we go out with an RFI, get some developers. The key to this ingredient is not just talking about it, but actually speaking to people that have the money, that have the resources to be able to pull this together. And once that's done, then we get the RFPs, and we make a decision as a town. I almost feel like saying family, but it kind of feels like a family in many ways. Winthrop is kind of like a close-knit family, and I think we will figure it out. I will say one thing that I think hasn't been said, is that this project needs many champions. It's not just an idea that's just, oh, let's just pick the best idea, this is going to happen. You need someone that is like a Jim, who's running hard with this complex idea. You need champions. You need someone in this council role to really push hard. So it's a big project. I want to be someone that can galvanize a lot of opinions and bring us together and hopefully find the best solution and make it happen. It's also one of the reasons why I joined the council. At 7.5 years of not having anything happen, it needs to happen. Time is now.
I guess we'll start with Mr. Millar for this question. In your view, what are the 3 most critical issues facing the Winthrop Public Schools?
It's like a repeat here of the same answers over and over. Yeah, so it's definitely obtaining more funding, also the special needs, and I'm going to say languages again also. The funding, I feel that our state legislation has not helped looking at Chapter 70 money enough. The current equation that they use can be relooked at. I know it's a complicated equation and how it actually breaks down. It just got passed and we went from $30 per student to $60 per student. And our Massachusetts Municipal Association actually put it out to the governor to say, hey, why can't that be $100? There is funding there to make it $100. So the equation needs to be looked at because there are certain circumstances where the wealthier towns are actually benefiting from it more than, our towns here. So if that can be relooked at, and we need our council who can feed to our state representatives and to fight for that change. It should be $100 per student. That's where we could get some funding from. So the other areas was the funding language. I feel, yes, like everybody else, that there is not enough language here. I took 4 years of Italian. And then special needs. It's growing. It's growing need that we need to have specialists in that area to support our kids in the school. And ties right back to the funding. If we don't have the funding, we can't help the kids.
Mr. Chapdelaine?
Sure. So the 3 biggest challenges we face, I think, can be summed up in kind of a difficult spot. We're a school system that is ranked in the bottom third in the Commonwealth. Now, we have great teachers, we have great buildings, we have great students, we have involved parents. What are we missing? We're missing AP classes at a larger level. We're missing a foreign language program. We're missing the ATC band. We're missing a music program. We're missing the things that we need to rise the level of quality of education for our kids. I have 3 kids in the school system. Mrs. Reynolds taught Maya last year, and I have a 2nd grader, and I have someone that's going into kindergarten next year. I will certainly be invested in these schools. I think the second issue isn't so much funding, it's where the money is coming from. What pot is it in? We have a level service budget that we present. We have a needs-based budget that we present. Well, then we hear that we're $1.5 million shy on the needs-based. Well, then it's not truly a need. So what I suggest is the needs-based budget actually has the needs that are actually needed, and that we bring back the wish list bucket, so that things like the ATC band can come back and be put up to the town council, and we can say, we need X amount of money to bring this program back. This is on our wish list. And that will make it so that we're not just saying, well, we're shy $1.5 million. What are we going to do about it? We actually get into what money we need to fund our school system and give our kids the best possible opportunity. The last piece of the puzzle is capacity. We have a school capacity of 2,000 students. We have 1,953 students enrolled right now. We're running out of room. We've heard a bit about school choice. We don't have room in this town for school choice, unfortunately or fortunately. We just simply don't. It's not a discussion we can have at this time. So our capacity issue is something that we're going to need to address. We don't want to put our kids in pods. We need to make sure that we find ways to do what we need to do to keep our class sizes at 22 or lower and not run out of capacity.
Councilor Musson, what, in your view, what are the 3 most critical issues facing the Winthrop Public Schools?
Well, I mean, there's nothing new here with revenue. I think that's pretty much a no-brainer. I think staffing, I know Suzanne Swope brought this up, but I thought this is pretty important, and I think there's been some great ideas out there. Staffing and retention. I think that we've become a stepping stone, both for fire, police, even DPW, and teaching. So, I mean, it's becoming like a routine thing. So how do we keep people? So we have to come up with solutions and ideas. One thing that Marcy Hamilton said that I loved, and I'd like to see if we could come to fruition on this, is actually giving some of the town employees discounted daycare. It's not that impossible to do, even a 20% discount. Now, if those people can afford daycare and have full-time jobs, both of them, both mother and father will be earning money now, and they'll have no worries that their kids are being well taken care of. I think that's a small gesture that could go a long way, especially now that if you have a loyalty to the people that are taking care of your kids and you feel like this is your home, you're not going to leave. You're going to feel like you want to stay. There's other things you can do that you can try to help keep that staff. So those are so revenue, retention. I think policy, I'm not a policy expert. I don't go to all the school committee meetings. It's not our job as a town council. Yeah. But I am the father of 2 kids that have gone through, well, one's gone through and one is still in it. And I see some of the challenges that the country is facing. We're fighting an attention battle. Every single day, we've got our phones basically glued to us, and the kids are the worst. I mean, they raised on this stuff. Snapchat was built for my daughter. Literally, the cutting edge of Snapchat was my daughter. Snap, snap. Like, I mean, she was doing more snaps than I could actually do one text in. Like, so I think that attention needs to be regulated. And I don't think it's fair for teachers to try to teach an environment where they're competing with phones. Mm-hmm. Done with the phones, in my opinion. But that's a policy thing, and we'll let the experts take care of it.
So you've actually started the answer to the next question. We'll start with you. If you had your magic wand, what would you either prioritize or completely de-emphasize within the schools?
I think prioritization would be the only thing I would talk about in this category. It would be an insult otherwise. But I'd say I think that the arts and music have been mentioned several times here, and there's been an uphill battle. We actually just donated a bunch of supplies to the arts programs. I've been doing this for years. I've worked with Teresa Dankner, and I give her a lot of my supplies at the studio that I work at, and they distribute it around to the different schools. It's actually sometimes like embarrassing how little that they get for just basic supplies. So I don't mind doing it as just a volunteer, but I think we could do it as a systematic process to make sure all the kids have plenty of materials for the arts, and we should try to get music going. We can actually do it without having to get tons of money. We can actually do it in more grassroots ways, but if I could just magic wand that, I would love to see a band be playing. I would love to see the arts thriving. I mean, there's not a home for every kid in either sports or drama. You need to give kids more opportunities. And then as far as the other magic wand, I would magic wand those phones into a little bin outside the door, and they turn those damn things off. That's it for now.
Mr. Chapdelaine, if you have anything to add, or if you what would you deprioritize versus prioritize?
Well, the prioritize is obviously easier. We need more AP classes, we need more foreign languages at a younger age if we're going to put students into the college system that are college ready and ready to make a difference moving forward. From a deprioritization, I guess is the word, it's a little bit more difficult. But I think what we got to go back to is reading, writing, arithmetic. Teaching our kids the basic fundamentals that they need to go out there and be effective in the workforce. Whether or not they go to college or whether they go to a trade school or something in between. We need to make sure we're still giving these kids what they need. And I know we're coming out of a pandemic where we're focusing a lot on social emotional learning and things of that nature, and the importance of treating the whole person. But if we are in fact facing this fiscal cliff that Mr. Tassinari brought up rather. Whoa! He's not even on the council. Whoa. But if we are truly facing this, we're going to have some very difficult decisions to make. And what we need to do is we need to prioritize the core functions of our school, which is to teach our kids the skills they need to go out there in the world.
Okay, good. And Mr. Millar, which items would you prioritize versus deprioritize?
Yeah, I think it's unanimous and no one wants to deprioritize anything.
Well, you're right. But
so I was lucky enough when I was in high school here that I got to be part of drama, the music department, and sports. So it's heartbreaking that the kids don't have that opportunity because maybe it's not understood that music is math, and it's beyond math. So when you don't have that, the kids lack the ability to learn that much more. I mean, that's how I started learning my fractions too, when I started studying music. So I think including the arts, we are very sports-centric here, and it seems like a lot of money goes towards sports, and I understand that. But it needs to be, encompassed on everything. It can't just be focused on sports, which kind of ties back into, the middle school project. Yeah, I like the idea of a sports complex, but maybe there should also be some arts involved in that too. So I think for me, the priority would be, yes, get the schools more well-rounded, tap that magic wand, make sure everything is there, every opportunity is there for every child. And I would also, with the growing needs of mental challenges, or I shouldn't say challenges, I apologize for that. The way it has changed over the years, COVID affected many children, and I don't feel we have enough resources to actually sit there individually and give the attention needed for some of these children. My magic wand would be to tap that and ensure that every child, no matter what time of day, where they are, have the ability to go and discuss with someone what's going on with their lives.
I'm going to take some deference as a co-moderator and propose my plan to get arts back in the music back in the school system. 2.5% budget override, and then you can have today's modern pop music being played as people walk into the ballot box and they say, "What is this garbage?" And then they, little subtleties. I like that. Yeah. So we're going to wrap up here with one more question, and on to my bad dad joke here. So obviously, We know property taxes, significant source of funding for education for the town as a whole. And there's growing talk of the concept of holding a debt exclusion for a new fire station vote. And given the almost half a decade worth of the schools not receiving the needs-based budget, do you foresee the need for a budget or levy limit override to properly fund the town, never mind the school district individually? We'll start with Mr. Millar.
So this is a tough one for me because every person in this room and in this town is being feed and taxed, and it just keeps going up. The economy, if you look at gas, well, luckily it's come down a little bit, but food prices, I mean, the individuals' budgets are getting maxed out completely. There are some lucky people whose budgets aren't, but the average person's budgets are being maxed out. Now, we're going to be asking for the debt exclusion. We've imposed a trash fee. The water has gone up, probably will go up again. So there comes a point where people aren't going to have the money to be able to maintain their life here in town. So I do think that, yes, we should put it out to the town to see if it's possible to get a 2.5 put in eventually. But we also need to look at the budget and ensure each budget line is being spent the way it really, truly should be. I know eventually we're going to get to a point where, yes, it will definitely be on the ballot. I don't think there's any if, and, or but, because the school does need more money, and that's one way of getting it. But again, the people of the town will voice it. Come November 7th, the voice on the debt exclusion, that will lead us on maybe different ideas of how we can get money. But we can't keep adding taxes on to the people in town. We're going to push people out. And then we're going to just, only certain types of people will be able to move in that have all the money in the world to be able to come in here. And we don't want that. We want a nice blend of the spectrum of every different budget in town, because that's what makes a good town, is when you have all different types of people living here.
Sure. Historically speaking, 2.5 override, it faces a lot of challenges. And for us to look at that, we need to ask ourselves, will it pass? It doesn't do us any good if we go through this as our solution if it's not something that can pass. And for the most part, I think the citizens are overtaxed. And if we're going into the economy that many of us think we're going into, more taxes aren't the answer. Our Chapter 70 funding currently is $8 million. The word is that could go as high as $12 million in the next year's budget. If that comes, that helps a lot of our issues. We get some Student Opportunity Act money. That could, our portion of that should be around $1.7 to $1.9 million. So there is help on the way. What we need to do as a town council, however, is make sure that all of that money that comes in from Chapter 70 goes directly to the school's budget. In years past, the town council would say, well, you know, we provide health insurance for the teachers, we provide these other benefits, we're just going to keep this little bit over here, and you guys can have the rest. That's not how it should work. Currently, the school budget is handling all of the benefits, all of the health insurance. So that means that every dollar, and Jim, you're going to hear this again if I get elected, every single dollar of the Chapter 70 money needs to go to the school budget. There can be no debate, no negotiation in it. The first dollar we take away is dollars we're taking away from our kids.
Councilor Munson?
I think that the Proposition 2.5 is actually a quagmire. It's just like, it's destined for major problems on a regular basis. You can't have like a free market where there's a inflation anywhere from 4 to 10% and then make sure that the budget only, and taxes only go up 2.5. So there's inevitably going to be collisions there where things don't add up. That's hence the trash fee. Those trash fees went up to us and we couldn't afford it as a town because we didn't get enough revenue to compensate for that, hence the trash fee to the public. It's not something anyone wants to do. It is just an outcome of the 2.5 proposition override. So occasionally things like this are going to come up. Personally, I kind of agree. I don't, you know, when you're making decisions about people's pocketbooks, first of all, it should be their decision, not necessarily ours. Anything that's really impactful on people's pocketbooks, I do think that should come down to the taxpayers. Because ultimately, what you're deciding is what kind of town you're going to end up being. Do you want to be a Swampscott, Marblehead, where only the upper middle class can afford? Or do you want to keep this a middle-class town where all walks of life are welcome? And I think that it's going to be a last resort for me. I don't want to offer a debt override unless we have to. And so, you know, and if it does come to that, it comes down to the people's choice. So we'll see what happens.
Well, that concludes our event tonight. I thank all the candidates for participating and sticking around. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. And good luck to all of you come November.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Take care. Have a good night. Thanks, Lisa.